So for this Mythbuster, we're going to talk about the overload principle when it comes to resistance training. And so according to the American College of Sports Medicine, to increase muscle, you typically need 2 to 4 sets performed 2 to 3 times a week. Now within each of those sets, you need 8 to 12 repetitions per set using a load of about 70% of your 1 max heart rate. Okay? So what is the overload principle? Why do we care about it? So the overload principle will increase stress. With the overload principle, increased stress must be placed on the musculature to allow for further strength gains. Meaning we can't just exercise a bicep curl using a 5-pound weight for the next 10 years. There won't be any muscle gains. Eventually you will get to a point where the muscle won't gain any more strength. So we constantly have to trick the body into thinking that, oh, okay, we need to work harder. And we do that by adding weights or adding resistance to the exercise we're doing. So for the overload principle, there are a couple factors that we look at. So number one, we're going to increase the absolute training load performed for a set number of repetitions. And with that, so we're going to increase the number of sets performed for each muscle group, or the increased frequency or the number of times we do it at each muscle group that is trained. So maybe it's arm day and you're going to do a bicep curl, and then you're going to do a tricep dip or a tricep kickback, or maybe you're going to do lateral raise. So all of those different muscles are within the arm. So we need to work each different muscle groups as a unit, but we have to increase either the number of times we're doing it or how often we're doing it, or we need to change how much weight we're doing it. Okay, so the next factor that can affect the overload principle is increasing the number of sets we're doing. So with that, there is a threshold whereby increased sets of exercise performed per muscle group within the training session doesn't necessarily provide greater muscle strength. So what this means is that, so yes, you have to increase the number of sets, but you also need to do that in conjunction with increasing the number of weight you add, and constantly changing that and changing it. One factor isn't going to necessarily be the absolute end all. And the last frequency and the least commonly used is you're going to increase the frequency of exercise. So what that means is it's going to be difficult to increase the training frequency once you've reached that certain threshold where we're not going to get any more muscle gain. So say you've been training for 16 weeks. Maybe you take 10 weeks off, which may seem like a lot, but maybe you're just not working at that high intensity that you have been for, let's say, 10 weeks. Well, that convinces the muscle and the brain connection that the muscle doesn't have to work as hard. So therefore, it kind of takes a step back. But with that, once those 10 weeks are up, you can go back to training at the either point you were or increase the weight, which will then allow the itself. Alright, so we've looked at how the overload principle works with someone who's fit and doesn't have a pathology. So now we're going to look at what happens when someone does have a pathology. Can we still apply this principle? So there was a study done in Norway on a 89-year-old female who had a hip fracture. And the clinicians there wanted to know, can this overload principle still work for somebody, specifically her, and to regain her strength and increase her function and mobility? So, as we said before, the overload principle is the training volume, and that's the total amount of work performed, must be periodically increased to continue overloading the muscles to make further improvements in strength. And so, keeping that in mind, this is what happened when they increased, specifically they worked with her on lower extremity strength, so knee extension, hip abduction, hamstring curls. So remember, keep that in mind. So the results of this study was, so for her instrumental ADLs, those are the activities daily living that are critical, you have to do every day. She was able to increase those by 63%. And so especially the ones she found the most beneficial of increased either stability and mobility were outdoor movements, traveling by public transport, and managing her own shopping. So that was a big increase. So some other statistics, so her sit to stand increased by 59%, her 6-minute walk test increased by 94%, her gait speed increased by 114%, and most importantly, which was a big increase, her maximum step height increased by 191%. And so what this tells us is that this simple practice of exercise principle of overload can help anybody, whether they have a pathology or they don't. And this is really important because as clinicians, we need to understand these principles to be able to adapt them to our patients and know that they can help because they're just the basic principles of exercise. And so, and secondary to that, so a training-induced changes in the muscle include changes in mass and nervous system function, which leads to increased functional capacity during ADL. Someone told me long